The rejection had happened 3 days ago, but Nora Moonstone still felt like she was drowning in the aftermath. 3 days since Marcus Blackwood, the alpha she had believed was her destined mate, had looked at her in front of the entire Silverpine pack and said the words that shattered her world. "I, Marcus Blackwood, reject you, Nora Moonstone, as my mate." The pack had gasped. Some had looked away in pity, others had whispered behind their hands, and a few had actually laughed at her humiliation. But the worst part wasn't the public spectacle, or even the physical pain that came with a rejected mate bond trying to tear itself apart inside her chest. The worst part was that she understood why he had done it. Nora was nobody, an Omega from a low-ranking family with no political connections, no special abilities, and nothing to offer an ambitious alpha except genuine love and loyalty. Marcus, on the other hand, was the son of the pack's beta and destined for leadership. He needed a mate who could advance his position, not drag it down. So she had done the only thing she could do. She had left, packed what little she owned, and walked out of Silverpine territory before the sun rose the next morning, knowing that staying would only prolong the agony for everyone involved. Better to disappear and let Marcus find the politically advantageous mate he clearly wanted. For 3 days, Nora had been wandering the neutral territories between packlands, trying to figure out where a rejected Omega with nothing to her name was supposed to go. Most packs wouldn't accept a rejected wolf. The stigma was too strong. The assumption being that if your own mate didn't want you, something must be fundamentally wrong with you. The snow had started falling that afternoon, and by evening it had turned into a full blizzard. Nora had found shelter in a small cave, built a meager fire with the last of her supplies, and tried not to think about the fact that she might actually freeze to death. Out here. Maybe that would be better than living with the constant ache of rejection, the feeling of being fundamentally unwanted. She was just beginning to drift into an exhausted sleep when she heard it, a sound that made every hair on her body stand on end. It was a howl, but not like any she had heard before. It was weak and pained, barely audible over the wind, and it was coming from somewhere very close. Every instinct told to stay in her cave and ignore it. She had her own survival to worry about, and getting involved with an unknown wolf could be dangerous. But the sound came again, weaker this time. And despite everything she had been through, despite the rejection that had nearly destroyed her, she found herself unable to ignore a creature in pain. She pushed out into the blizzard, following the sound through driving snow that made it almost impossible to see. It took 15 minutes of searching before she found him, and when she did, her breath caught in her throat. The wolf was massive, easily the largest she had ever encountered, even collapsed in the snow and clearly dying. The creature radiated a power that made her Omega nature want to submit on instinct. His fur was thick and beautiful, though currently matted with blood from what looked like multiple serious wounds across his body. "Oh, goddess," Nora whispered, dropping to her knees beside the dying wolf. "What happened to you?" The wolf's eyes opened at her voice, and Nora felt something electric pass through her at the sight of them. They were an unusual color, intelligent and aware, even through obvious pain, and they fixed on her face with an intensity that took her breath away. "I'm going to help you," she said, though she had no idea how. Her supplies were limited, and her knowledge of healing was basic at best. Just hold on, okay?" Getting the massive wolf back to her cave was nearly impossible, but somehow managed it through a combination of determination and what felt like pure desperation. By the time she had him settled near her small fire, she was exhausted and soaked through with melted snow, but she didn't allow herself to rest. The wounds were bad, deep gashes that looked like they came from claws or teeth, still bleeding despite what must have been hours since the initial injury. Nora used what remained of her clean clothing to fashion bandages, packed the wounds with snow to slow the bleeding, and tried to remember everything her mother had taught her about field medicine before she died. "You're going to be okay," she murmured as she worked, not knowing if the wolf could understand, but needing to say the words anyway. "I won't let you die. I know what it feels like to want to give up, to feel like maybe it would be easier to just let go. But you're going to fight. Do you hear me? You're going to live through this." The wolf's eyes tracked her movements, and several times he made soft sounds that seemed like responses to her words. As the hours passed, and she continued to tend his wounds, clean away blood, and try to keep him warm, found herself talking more freely than she had in days. "I was rejected," she admitted quietly, her hands gentle as she checked his bandages. 3 days ago, in front of my entire pack, the alpha I thought was my mate told everyone he didn't want me. And the worst part is, I can't even blame him. I'm nobody special, just an omega with nothing to offer." The wolf made a low sound that might have been disagreement, and felt tears prick at her eyes. "You're sweet to pretend that's not true," she said, with a sad smile, "but we both know how the world works. Status matters, power matters, and love." She laughed bitterly. "Love doesn't matter at all when measured against political advantage." She worked through the night, barely sleeping, checking the wolf's wounds, and keeping the fire going despite her dwindling supply of wood. Several times she thought she was losing him, his breathing becoming shallow and his body going still, but each time she would talk to him urgently, beg him to hold on, and somehow he would rally. "Why am I fighting so hard for you?" Nora asked as false dawn began to lighten the sky. "I don't even know you. You could be dangerous. You could attack me the moment you're strong enough. But I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't watch another living thing suffer when I have the power to help. Even if I'm broken and rejected and worthless, at least I can do this. At least I can try to save you." The wolf's eyes opened again, fixing on her face with that same intense stare, and felt something shift in her chest. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it felt like a tiny crack in the wall of pain that had been surrounding her heart since the rejection. As true sunrise approached, the blizzard finally began to ease. Nora was dozing against the cave wall, exhausted from her night of desperate healing, when sounds from outside jerked her awake. Not the wind or snow this time, but voices. Many voices coming from multiple directions. Nora moved to the cave entrance and felt her blood run cold at what she saw. There were wolves everywhere, dozens of them in both human and animal form, searching through the snow-covered landscape with obvious urgency and purpose, and they were all heading in her direction, drawn by the smoke from her fire, or perhaps by some scent they were tracking. Fear flooded through her. This many wolves moving together with such purpose could only mean one thing. This was a pack on a mission, and was alone and vulnerable, with no one to protect her. If they decided she had done something wrong, if the wolf she had been tending belonged to one of them, and they thought she had heard him, she turned back to the wolf, intending to wake him and warn him that his pack was coming, but stopped short at what she saw. The massive creature was watching her with those intense eyes, and there was something almost like apology in his expression. "Your pack is here," Nora said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her fear. "You should probably let them know you're okay before they—" The rest of her sentence died as the wolf's form began to shimmer and change. Nora had seen wolves shift before, but never with this kind of power, never with an energy that made the very air crackle with electricity. Within seconds, the massive wolf had transformed into a man and felt the breath leave her lungs. He was beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with the sheer presence he radiated. Even injured and exhausted, even covered in her makeshift bandages and clearly weakened from blood loss, he looked like exactly what he was, an alpha of unimaginable power and authority. "Who are you?" Nora whispered, though part of her already knew the answer. "My name is Theron Stormcrown," he replied, his voice rough from disuse, but carrying an authority that made her Omega nature sit up and take notice. "And I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Territories." The words hit like a physical blow. The Alpha King. She had spent the night saving the life of the most powerful wolf in existence, had touched him and bandaged him, and talked to him about her rejection like he was just any wounded creature. "I didn't know," she stammered, backing away instinctively. "Your Majesty, I'm so sorry. I should have been more respectful. I shouldn't have touched you without permission. The way he said her name stopped her mid-panic. "You saved my life. You spent the entire night keeping me alive when I would have died in that snow. There is nothing to apologize for, but Your Majesty." The shout came from outside the cave, and suddenly the entrance was filled with wolves in human form, all wearing expressions of relief and concern. "Thank the goddess. We've been searching all night. Are you injured? What happened?" Theron's eyes never left Space as he responded to his people. "I was ambushed by rogues 20 miles north of here. They used silver weapons and left me to die in the blizzard. I managed to shift and follow my instincts south, but I would have died if not for this Omega who found me and spent the night saving my life." Every eye in the cave entrance turned to Nora, and she felt herself shrinking under the weight of so much attention. These were the Alpha King's personal guard, his most trusted wolves, and they were all looking at her with expressions ranging from gratitude to suspicion to outright shock. "She's a rogue," one of them said, a tall female alpha whose voice carried obvious skepticism. "Alone in neutral territory with no pack scent. Why would a rogue risk herself to help anyone?" "Because she has a kind heart," Theron said firmly, attempting to stand and immediately swaying. Nora moved without thinking, rushing to support his weight, despite the intimidating presence of all the other wolves. "You need to rest," she said, her healer's instincts overriding her fear. "Those wounds are serious, and you've lost a lot of blood. If you try to move too much right now, you'll tear them open again." "Listen to her," Thronen told his guards with a slight smile. "She's been giving me orders all night, and I've learned it's easier to just obey." Several of the guards exchanged glances that Nora couldn't interpret, but they stepped back to give her space as she helped Theon settle back down by the fire. "We need to get you back to the palace," the female alpha said. "Our healers can properly treat those wounds, and later," Theron interrupted. "First I want to hear how the search went. How long was I missing?" 14 hours, Your Majesty. We've had every available wolf searching since you didn't return from your scouting mission last evening. 14 hours. Ara had spent 14 hours keeping the Alpha King alive, and she hadn't even known who he was. The absurdity of it would have been funny if she wasn't so terrified about what would happen. "Now, Your Majesty," she said quietly, trying to edge toward the cave entrance. "Now that your pack is here, you don't need me anymore. I should probably go." And no, the single word carried so much authority that Nora froze in place. "You're not going anywhere. Not yet, but I'm just a rogue Omega. You don't need what I need, Theron said, his eyes intense on hers, is to talk to the woman who saved my life, the woman who spent the entire night tending my wounds and talking to me about her pain, the woman who told a dying wolf that she understood what it felt like to want to give up. Nora felt her face flush with embarrassment and shame. She had forgotten that he could understand everything she had said, all her confessions about rejection and worthlessness. You were rejected, he continued, and several of the guards gasped. 3 days ago, by an alpha named Marcus Blackwood of the Silver Pine Pack. How do you know that? Nora whispered. Because you told me last night while you were saving my life. You told me everything. His expression softened. And I want you to know that Marcus Blackwood is a fool. Any alpha who would reject an Omega with your compassion, your strength, your ability to put someone else's life before your own survival is too stupid to deserve you. The words cracked something open in Nora's chest, and she felt tears beginning to fall, despite her best efforts to hold them back. Don't cry, Theron said gently. Please don't cry. I can't stand to see you in pain after everything you did for me. I'm sorry, Nora managed through her tears. I'm not used to anyone saying kind things about me, especially not after the rejection. Well, you'd better get used to it, he replied with a small smile, because I have a lot more kind things to say. Starting with the fact that during the night we spent together, something happened. The mate bond formed between us. The cave went completely silent. Nora stared at Theron in shock, unable to process what he was saying. The female alpha guard looked like she might faint. Several other guards were exchanging excited whispers. That's impossible, Nora finally managed. I was already rejected. The bond with Marcus was clearly not a true mate bond, Theron interrupted gently. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. Nora, if Marcus could reject you, it's because you were never truly meant to be his. You were meant to be mine. But you're the Alpha King, Nora protested, her voice rising with desperation. You can't be mated to a rejected Omega with no pack and no status. It would be a scandal. It would undermine your authority. You need someone powerful and connected. Someone who can help you lead, not some broken wolf who you are not broken. The Ron's voice carried such absolute conviction that Nora fell silent. You are the strongest person I've ever met. You survived rejection, which would have destroyed most wolves. You walked away from your pack rather than become a burden, and then when you found a dying stranger, you used your last supplies and spent your entire night saving his life. That's not broken, Lara. That's extraordinary. But I can't be a queen, whispered. I don't know how to lead. I don't know anything about politics or diplomacy, or neither did I when I first became king, Thorin said with a gentle smile. Leadership is learned, Nora, but compassion, the ability to see value in others even when you're suffering yourself, that can't be taught. And it's exactly what I need in a mate. The female Alpha Guard stepped forward, her expression now warm instead of suspicious. Your Majesty, if I may speak freely. Always, Commander Selene. I've served you for 50 years, and in all that time I've never seen you look at anyone the way you're looking at this Omega. If she's your mate, then she's exactly what you need, regardless of her background or status. Selene turned to Nora with a respectful bow. My lady, I apologize for my earlier suspicion. Any wolf who would save our king's life deserves our respect and gratitude. I'm not a lady, Nora said automatically. I'm just my mate, Theron finished firmly, and therefore the future queen of the Northern Territories. If you'll accept me, that is. Nora looked at him, at this powerful alpha, who was looking at her like she was precious rather than worthless, and felt the mate bond humming between them with undeniable truth. He wasn't lying. This was real. The moon goddess really had paired her with the Alpha King himself. "Why would you want me?" she asked, voicing the fear that had been building since the rejection. "After Marcus didn't want me, I thought. I thought maybe there was something wrong with me. Maybe I really am worthless." "There is nothing wrong with you," Theron said with fierce conviction. "Marcus rejected you because he's a status-obsessed fool who can't see past political advantage to recognize genuine value. But I see you, Nora. I see your kindness, your strength, your compassionate heart, and I don't just want you as my mate because the moon goddess chose you. I want you because you're exactly the kind of person I've been hoping to find for over a century." The sincerity in his voice broke through the last of Nora's defenses, and she found herself moving closer despite her fear. "I don't know how to be a queen. I'll teach you. We'll learn together." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand. The mate bond flared at the contact, warm and comforting, and nothing like the painful pull she had felt with Marcus. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to accept me out of gratitude or obligation. If you truly don't want this, if the idea of being my mate is too overwhelming, I'll respect that. I'll make sure you're taken care of, help you find a pack that will accept you and never bother you again, even though we're mates. Even then, because you've already been forced into one bond you didn't choose, and I won't do that to you again. Your choice matters, Nora. Your feelings matter. You matter." The words were everything she had needed to hear in the days since her rejection. Everything Marcus had never said or believed. Looking into Theron's eyes, Nora saw not just desire or political calculation, but genuine caring and respect. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "I'm scared of being rejected again, of failing at being a queen, of proving everyone right about me being worthless." "Then we'll be scared together," Theron said, echoing the words she had spoken to him the night before. "Because I'm terrified too. I'm terrified of not being good enough for you, of not being able to undo the damage that rejection did, of failing to show you how valued and precious you truly are." Nora felt fresh tears falling, but this time they weren't tears of pain. "You really mean that? Every word? You saved my life last night, Nora. Not just physically, though you certainly did that. But you also reminded me why I wanted to become king in the first place, to create a world where wolves like you, wolves with kind hearts and compassionate souls, are valued and protected instead of rejected and cast aside." "I want to accept," Lara whispered. "I want to believe this is real, and that I deserve it, but I'm so afraid of being hurt again. I understand, and I'll wait as long as you need. We can take this slowly, get to know each other properly, and you can decide when or if you're ready to formally accept the bond." He squeezed her hand gently. "But in the meantime, will you at least come home with me? Let my healers check you over. Make sure you're healthy after 3 days of wandering alone. Let me show you what your life could be like if you choose to be my mate." Nora looked around at the assembled guards, all of whom were watching her with expressions of hope and encouragement, rather than the suspicion or disdain she was used to seeing in Packwolf's eyes. These people had been searching through a blizzard all night for their missing king. And now they were looking at her, a rejected rogue Omega, like she was something precious. "Okay," she said finally, feeling something like courage building in her chest. "I'll come with you. but just to recover and think about everything. I'm not promising anything more than that. That's all I'm asking, Theron assured her with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. The journey to the palace took most of the day, with Theon insisting they travel slowly despite his guards' obvious eagerness to get their injured king home. He stayed close to Nora the entire time, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the territory, clearly trying to help her feel more comfortable. When the palace finally came into view, Nora felt her breath catch. It was massive and beautiful, built of stone that seemed to glow in the afternoon light, and it looked like something from a fairy tale, rather than a real place where real wolves lived. "It's too much," she whispered, sudden panic flooding through her. "I can't possibly belong here. Look at me. I'm covered in dirt and blood. I have no proper clothes. I'm nobody." "You're mine," Theon interrupted gently, "and that makes you somebody very important. But if this is truly too overwhelming, we can go somewhere else. I have a cabin in the mountains, small and simple and quiet. We could go there instead, spend time together, away from all the politics and pressure." The offer was tempting, but shook her head. "No. If I'm going to consider being your mate, I need to see what that life actually looks like. No running away or hiding. I need to face this head on." Pride shone in Theron's eyes. "You're braver than you know." The palace staff were lined up to greet their returning king, and was overwhelmed by the sheer number of wolves present. But Theron never left her side, introducing her not as a rescued rogue, but as his mate and future queen. And the respect she received from every wolf they encountered was both surprising and deeply moving. "Your Majesty," an elderly wolf said with a deep bow as they entered the palace proper. "Thank the goddess you're safe. We were so worried when you didn't return." "I'm fine, Elder Marcus, thanks to this remarkable Omega." Theron's hand at the small of Nora's back was a constant reassurance. "She saved my life and asked for nothing in return." The Ehlers' eyes widened as he looked at, and she braced herself for judgment or criticism. But instead he bowed to her as well. "Then we are all in your debt, young lady. Welcome to the Northern Palace." The rooms Theon gave her were larger than any space had ever occupied, with a massive bed covered in soft blankets, a bathroom with actual hot water, and windows that overlooked mountains that seemed to stretch forever. A team of servants appeared almost immediately with food, clean clothes, and offers to help her bathe and dress. "This is too much," Nora protested, still standing in the doorway and feeling like she might wake up at any moment to find this was all a dream. "It's exactly what you deserve," Theon corrected gently. He was leaning against the door frame, clearly exhausted from the journey, but refusing to rest until he made sure she was settled. "And you don't have to make any decisions right now. Take your time, get some rest. Let my healers check you over. We'll talk more when you're ready." After he left, Nora allowed the servants to help her into a bath, and as she sank into the hot water, she finally allowed herself to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been a rejected Omega with no future and no hope. Today, she was being offered a chance to be queen, to be the mate of the most powerful alpha in existence, to have everything she had ever dreamed of. But the wounds from her rejection were still too fresh, the fear of being hurt again too strong. How could she trust this when Marcus had taught her that mate bonds could be broken? That love was less important than status and political advantage. Over the following days, Theron kept his promise to give her space, while still making his interest clear. He would invite her to join him for meals, where he would ask about her thoughts and opinions, and actually listen to her answers. He showed her around the palace, and introduced her to key members of his staff, always treating her with respect and making it clear she was valued. But he never pushed for more, never demanded she make a decision about accepting the mate bond. He just existed in her space, patient and kind, and everything Marcus had never been. On the fourth day, a delegation arrived from the Silver Pine Pack, and Nora felt her blood run cold when she recognized Marcus Blackwood among them. He was here in the palace, probably for some political meeting that had nothing to do with her. She tried to make herself scarce, hiding in her rooms and hoping to avoid any confrontation. But fate had other plans. She rounded a corner and came face to face with the alpha who had rejected her. And for a moment, they both froze. "Nora," Marcus said, and there was something in his voice she couldn't identify. "I heard you were here. I wanted to." "You wanted to what?" The voice that cut through the hallway was cold enough to freeze blood, and looked up to see Theron approaching with an expression that made even Marcus take an involuntary step back. "Apologize. Explain why you publicly rejected your mate. Beg for forgiveness." "Your Majesty," Marcus stammered, clearly not having expected to run into the Alpha King. "I didn't realize you were. That is, I was just trying to speak with my mate, the unfinished," his tone making the words sound like a threat. "The Omega you were too stupid to value. The woman who spent an entire night saving my life while you were probably congratulating yourself on your political maneuvering." Marcus's eyes widened with shock as he looked between the Andra. "Your mate, but she's just finished that sentence, and I will personally ensure that the Silver Pine Pack spends the next decade regretting it." Theron interrupted, his alpha power pressing down so heavily that Marcus dropped to his knees. "Nora is my mate, my future queen, and the most valuable wolf in this entire palace. And you rejected her because you were too focused on political advantage to recognize genuine worth when it was standing right in front of you." Nora felt something crack open in her chest as she watched the alpha who had broken her heart being forced to his knees by the man who wanted to heal it. This was vindication on a scale she had never imagined. Public proof that her rejection hadn't been about her value, but about Marcus's blindness. "I'm sorry," Marcus managed, his voice strained under the weight of Theron's dominance. "I didn't know. I thought you thought status mattered more than character." Theron finished coldly, "And in doing so, you proved yourself unworthy of the gift the moon goddess tried to give. You! Now get out of my sight before I decide that your presence in my territory is unwanted." Marcus fled, and several other members of the Silver Pine delegation who had been watching from a distance quickly followed. When they were gone, Theon immediately turned to Nora, his expression shifting from cold fury to warm concern. "Are you all right? I'm sorry you had to see him. If I had known he was in the delegation, I would have made sure you were nowhere near." "Thank you," Nora interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for defending me, for making him acknowledge what he did, for showing me that I wasn't the problem." "You were never the problem," Theron said fiercely, pulling her gently into his arms. "His rejection had nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with his inability to recognize value when it was right in front of him. You are precious, Nora. To me, to the moon goddess, to anyone with enough sense to look past political calculations and see your beautiful heart." Nora buried her face in his chest and let herself cry, finally releasing all the pain and shame and fear she had been carrying since her rejection. And through it all, Theron held her, murmuring reassurances and making it clear that she was safe and valued and home. When her tears finally subsided, Nora pulled back just enough to look up at his face. "I want to accept," she said quietly, the mate bond. I want to accept you as my mate." Hope blazed in Thronon's eyes. "Are you sure? You don't have to decide just because of what happened with Marcus. Take more time if you need it. I don't need more time. I've spent the last 4 days watching you be patient and kind and respectful. You've shown me what it means to be truly valued, what it feels like to be with an alpha who sees me as a partner rather than a political liability. I'm still scared and I'm still healing from the rejection, but I want to do it with you. I choose you, Thorin. I choose us." The smile that spread across his face was radiant enough to light up the entire hallway. "Thank you," he whispered, pulling her close again. "Thank you for being brave enough to trust me. I promise I will spend every day proving that your trust is deserved." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place she had never been, but had always been searching for. The mate bond flared between them, solidifying into something permanent and unbreakable, and finally understood what the moon goddess had known all along. Her rejection hadn't been an ending. It had been a detour, a necessary path that led her exactly where she needed to be. Marcus's rejection had freed her to find her true mate, the alpha, who would value her for exactly who she was rather than rejecting her for what she couldn't offer. The official mating ceremony was held a week later, and wolves from across the territory came to witness their alpha king bind himself to the Omega, who had saved his life. Nora stood beside Thoron in front of hundreds of witnesses and felt no fear, only certainty that this was right and real and exactly what she deserved. As they sealed their bond with a kiss that sent sparks of magic dancing through the air around them, caught sight of Marcus in the crowd, watching with an expression of regret that she felt nothing about. He had rejected her, yes, but in doing so, he had freed her to find something infinitely better. She wasn't broken. She never had been. She was a survivor, a healer, a woman with a kind heart and a courageous soul. And now she was a queen, mated to an alpha, who saw all of that and loved her for it. The rejected Omega who had found a dying wolf in a blizzard had saved the life of a king and discovered her own worth in the process. And her reign would be remembered not for the status she lacked or the rejection she survived, but for the compassion and strength that had drawn the attention of the moon goddess herself. Sometimes being rejected is just the moon goddess's way of moving you toward your true destiny. Sometimes saving a stranger changes everything. And sometimes the Omega everyone dismissed as worthless turns out to be exactly what a king needs to be complete,